And what I'll do is to cover the key concepts we would go over in class, had we had class on Monday. And then I'm going to give you a very short case study, and when we come together next Monday, we'll start with the case study, and that'll give you a chance to play with the concepts that we have here. So I hope this works for you all. This is class section number 1, okay? What we would have done, had we gotten together last Monday, would have been first, to review last week quickly to see if there were any questions about the Mintzberg articles or the projects or any of the other things that we had spoken about. The second thing we would have done would have been to talk about what is strategic planning according to Allison and Kay, which you would have read the first 2 chapters of the book before you came to class on Monday. So I just want to quickly touch on a couple of these concepts today. And then when we do our other 2 videotape sessions, we'll talk about some of the differences between nonprofits and for-profits as they impact the strategic planning process, which was also one of your readings. And then the last thing that we would have finished up with is stakeholder analysis. Who are our stakeholders? How do we identify them? How do we figure out which one's more important than another and when? So that would have been last week, but today is now what is strategic planning, and then tomorrow I'll do differences for a nonprofit, and then a third one will be stakeholder analysis. So I hope that works for everybody. Okay, so Allison and Kay. Great workbook. I hope now that you've played with some of the worksheets and you've seen the way the book's written that you like it as much as I do. And if you don't, I hope you can tolerate it to get through 12 weeks, because that's about what we've got. So they start out in the first chapter talking about what is strategic planning and why do you want to plan. And I think we touched upon some of those in class the other day, but what I like about the way they talk about it, they talk about the building commitment to the process, which we had touched upon, figuring out what the organizational priorities are, also something we had talked about, and thirdly, the connection of allocation of resources to the strategic planning ideas, which we also talked about in terms of nonprofit as something that's complicated at best. What I also want to mention is something they talk about in what are some of the keys to effective planning from their perspective. Focusing on the most important issues. We spoke about how many nonprofits have this many issues and this much time to deal with them. And Allison and Kay, straight up at the beginning, say figure out which one's the most important, and that's what you work on. The idea of being willing to question the status quo and what is currently in place. This will make more sense when we talk tomorrow about mission creep and the idea that nonprofits tend to move towards the money. So be really willing to say, so why do you do it that way? And what makes this mission statement so sacred that we can't play with it anymore? It's important to produce a document at the end of the day because people need to see something after they're done talking about it, and that what you write in this strategic plan has to become an operational plan so that it doesn't exist up here, but it becomes part of what we do every day. What I would add to this, and they spend a little bit of time on, is the difference between strategic planning and long-range planning operational plan. It's a short section, but I think it's important, and I want you to take a look at those in the book if you haven't already. And if you're not clear about those, I would say visionary, changeable environment, involves some risk, steady, stable environment. This looks like what we talked about in Mintzburg when people would write these plans in the 50s and 60s and 70s before things became more volatile and more quickly moving and changing. These are your financials translated into allocation of resources. And this is the what do I want to get done in the next year? How am I going to do it? Different, but related. Okay, the last concept that I would like to make sure that we touch upon that's in the book. There's lots of stuff in these chapters, but we'll get at them a little bit more in some of the other areas. There's a difference in the way Allison and Kay approach this idea of strategy and what it looks like that's different from a for-profit. They make a point of talking about strategy in programs, strategy in resource development, a difference in strategy around administrative capacities, and lastly, they have a category for governance strategies. And that theme carries through all the way through the book. So when they talk about issues, these are the 4 categories that they think you should be looking at your issues to discuss. This is very different than what you see in the for-profit, which is this triangle that I will leave you with and pick up on in our next tape when we talk about differences between nonprofit and for-profit. So between now and when you look at this next tape, what would you put in this triangle? A little intrigue. See you tomorrow.